What if one moment changed everything? A reclusive scientist, a lost child, a loyal dog. When they collide in rural Vermont, secrets buried for years begin to surface. Will Eleanor's rare roses save lives? Can Sophia's innocence break through walls built from pain? Subscribe now and comment where you're watching from. On a crisp autumn afternoon in rural Vermont, the amber and crimson leaves danced against a cloudless cobalt sky. Maple Hollow Farm sat nestled in a valley of rolling hills, its weathered red barn and white farmhouse a scene from a quintessential New England postcard. Eleanor Winters, a slender woman in her early 60s with silver-streaked auburn hair and penetrating green eyes, was pruning her prized heirloom roses when a commotion erupted from the property's edge. Duke, her commanding German shepherd with a glossy black and tan coat, bolted toward the wooden fence separating Maple Hollow from the neighboring estate. His usually dignified demeanor had transformed into frantic barking and anxious circling. "Duke, what is it, boy?" Eleanor called, setting down her gardening shears. The dog's behavior was too purposeful to ignore. After 3 years of near isolation following her husband's abrupt departure, Duke had become her sole companion and most trusted confidant. Following her loyal sentinel through the orchard, Eleanor's weathered boots crunched against fallen leaves as she approached the property line. There, caught in the wire fence, was a small girl no older than 5. Her pink floral dress was snagged in the metal, tears streaming down her cherubic face framed by golden curls that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Oh my goodness. Hold still, sweetheart." Eleanor rushed forward, her voice softer than it had been in years. "I'm going to help you. I want my mommy," the child sobbed, her tiny hands red from trying to free herself. "I know, darling. We'll find her," Eleanor assured her, carefully untangling the fabric from the wire. "My name is Eleanor. What's yours?" "Sophia," the girl hiccuped between sobs. "But Grandma calls me Sonny." "That's a beautiful name," Eleanor smiled, finally freeing the child. "Those golden curls of yours are certainly as bright as sunshine." Duke approached cautiously, his ears perked forward with interest. To Eleanor's surprise, Sophia's tears subsided as she noticed the dog. "Is he friendly?" she asked, her voice small but curious. "Very friendly," Eleanor nodded. "His name is Duke. He's the one who heard you and came to help." Sophia extended a tentative hand, and Duke gently licked her fingers, drawing a giggle from the previously distraught child. "I was chasing a blue butterfly," Sophia explained, pointing toward a meadow beyond the fence. "I wanted to show Grandma. Then it flew away, and I didn't know which way was back to our picnic." In the distance, voices called Sophia's name with increasing urgency. Eleanor helped the child through the proper gate and waved to attract attention. A woman in her 30s sprinted toward them, her face a mask of relief and lingering panic. "Sophia? Oh my God!" The woman swept the child into her arms, holding her tightly. "We've been looking everywhere. This nice lady and her doggie saved me, Mommy," Sophia explained. The woman turned to Eleanor, gratitude shining in eyes identical to her daughter's. "I'm Rebecca Collins. I don't know how to thank you." Eleanor, normally guarded around strangers, felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. "No thanks necessary. I'm just glad Duke found her." Little did Eleanor know that this chance encounter would forever alter the trajectory of all their lives over the next 12 months. Thawing a heart long frozen by solitude and disappointment. The Collins family's gratitude manifested in a bouquet of store-bought flowers delivered to Eleanor's doorstep the following day. Eleanor stared at the cheerful arrangement, a stark contrast to her meticulously cultivated heirloom roses, with mixed emotions. The card read, "To our guardian angel and her heroic dog. With deepest thanks, the Collins family." 2 days later, a knock at her door brought Eleanor face to face with Rebecca Collins again, this time accompanied by little Sophia and an elegant older woman with a silk scarf wrapped around her thinning hair. "I hope we're not intruding," Rebecca said hesitantly, noting Eleanor's surprised expression. "Sonny hasn't stopped talking about Duke, and we were hoping. Can I please see the doggie again?" Sophia interrupted, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Eleanor's initial instinct was to politely decline. Her sanctuary had remained undisturbed by visitors since Martin's departure 3 years ago, when he'd chosen the Amazon rainforest over their marriage. Yet something in Sophia's eager expression melted her resolve. "Of course," she heard herself say. Duke would love the company. As Sophia raced across the yard with Duke, the older woman extended her hand. I'm Virginia Harper, Rebecca's mother and Sonny's grandmother. I wanted to personally thank you for finding our little wanderer. Eleanor noticed the slight tremor in Virginia's hand and the pallor beneath her dignified demeanor. Eleanor Winters, she replied, accepting the handshake. Would you care for some tea? The afternoon is getting chilly. Inside her farmhouse kitchen, with its copper pots hanging from ceiling hooks and windowsills lined with potted herbs, Eleanor felt strangely comfortable with these strangers. Virginia admired the botanical illustrations framed on the walls. These are exquisite, she remarked. Did you draw them yourself? Eleanor nodded. Botanical illustration was once more than a hobby for me. Mom was a research botanist before. Rebecca hesitated, glancing at Eleanor. Before I decided privacy suited me better, Virginia finished diplomatically. Through the window, they watched Sophia throwing a tennis ball for Duke, her laughter carrying across the yard. She's quite taken with your roses, Rebecca observed. She's been drawing them since we left. The pink ones are hybrid tea roses I've been developing for years, Eleanor explained, finding herself sharing information she normally guarded. They're uniquely frost-resistant while maintaining their fragrance. That's remarkable, Virginia said, suppressing a sudden cough. Have you considered their commercial potential? Before Eleanor could answer, Rebecca placed a gentle hand on her mother's arm. Mom, let's not talk business. Eleanor didn't invite us over for a consultation. Virginia's expression momentarily tightened with pain before she composed herself. Of course, dear. Forgive me, old habits from my pharmaceutical consulting days. Later, as the Collins family prepared to leave, Sophia approached Eleanor with solemn importance. Can I come see Duke again? She asked, her blue eyes wide with hope. Eleanor surprised herself by nodding. Perhaps next weekend, if it's all right with your mother. As their car disappeared down the gravel driveway, Eleanor stood on her porch, unsettled by the unfamiliar warmth of human connection. Duke pressed against her leg reassuringly. What do you think, old friend? She whispered. Are we ready for visitors again? That night, Eleanor found herself researching Virginia's symptoms online, recognizing signs of a serious illness. Something about the woman's dignified struggle resonated with her, sparking a long-dormant instinct to help. In her greenhouse, she looked at her experimental roses with new eyes, wondering if her life's work might have value beyond her solitary appreciation. Eleanor's greenhouse stood behind her farmhouse like a crystal palace, its glass panels gleaming in the morning sun. Unlike the weathered charm of the main house, the greenhouse featured state-of-the-art climate controls and specialized lighting systems, remnants of a past life Eleanor rarely discussed. Inside, rows of experimental roses thrived in carefully monitored conditions, each variety meticulously labeled with scientific notation. 3 weeks after the fence incident, Eleanor found herself giving an impromptu tour to an enthralled Sophia and a clearly impressed Rebecca. Virginia had remained home, having one of her bad days, as Rebecca had explained in a hushed tone when they arrived. These are so pretty, Sophia exclaimed, pointing at a cluster of deep crimson blooms. They look like the ones in Beauty and the Beast. Eleanor smiled despite herself. These are actually quite special. They're a hybrid I've been developing for years. She gently tilted one of the blossoms. See how the petals have an iridescent quality? That's extremely rare in roses. Rebecca leaned closer. They're stunning. And you mentioned they have some unusual properties. Eleanor hesitated, then reached for her tablet on a nearby workbench. Yes, I've been tracking certain chemical compounds in the plant tissue. She pulled up a series of graphs and molecular structures. This particular variety produces elevated levels of certain flavonoids and alkaloids that show interesting pharmaceutical potential. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. Mom mentioned you might have been in research, but I had no idea. She studied the complex charts with obvious understanding. Have you published any of this work? No, Eleanor replied curtly. That part of my life ended when I moved here. An awkward silence fell, broken by Sophia's innocent question. Miss Eleanor, why do you live all alone except for Duke? Sophia, Rebecca admonished. That's not polite to ask. Eleanor surprised herself by answering. Sometimes people need quiet to heal, Sonny. And sometimes the people we love choose different paths. Duke, who had been patiently accompanying them, suddenly perked up his ears and trotted to the greenhouse door, whining softly. "We have another visitor," Eleanor said, frowning. Unexpected guests were rare at Maple Hollow. Outside, a sleek black car with government plates was parked in her driveway. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, his gaze sweeping the property before settling on Eleanor. She recognized the calculated assessment in his eyes immediately. "Dr. Winters? I'm James Harrington from North Star Pharmaceuticals." He extended a business card. "We've been following your work from afar for some time. I believe you're trespassing, Mr. Harrington," Eleanor said coldly. "And I haven't been Dr. Winters in many years." Rebecca glanced between them, confusion evident in her expression. "Forgive the intrusion," Harrington continued smoothly. "But our research team has identified some of your published botanical work from your university days. We believe your current hobby might have significant commercial applications. How did you find me?" Eleanor demanded, positioning herself slightly in front of Rebecca and Sophia. "Small towns talk," he replied with a thin smile. "Especially when a reclusive former biotechnology pioneer suddenly starts entertaining visitors and practicing her old skills." Duke growled low in his throat, sensing Eleanor's tension. "I'll need you to leave," Eleanor stated firmly. "Any communication can go through my lawyer." After Harrington reluctantly departed, Eleanor turned to find Rebecca staring at her with new awareness. "You're Dr. Eleanor Winters," Rebecca said slowly. "The same Dr. Winters who revolutionized plant-based pharmaceutical compounds at Cornell 15 years ago before disappearing completely from scientific circles." Eleanor sighed, her carefully constructed privacy crumbling. "That life is behind me." "But why?" Rebecca pressed. "Your work was groundbreaking." "Because some discoveries aren't worth what they cost," Eleanor answered quietly, memories of her professional past and personal failures surfacing unwillingly. "Now, would you like some apple cider before you go? I believe I promised Sophia she could feed the chickens." The first snowfall of November dusted Maple Hollow Farm with a crystalline blanket, transforming Eleanor's property into a winter wonderland. Inside the local diner on Main Street, however, the atmosphere was anything but serene. Rebecca Collins nursed a cup of coffee as whispers circulated around her. "That's her, the one whose daughter found the Winters woman," said Mabel Thornton, the postmistress, not bothering to lower her voice. "My cousin worked at Cornell with Dr. Winters before she vanished. Says she was brilliant but unstable after that controversy." Rebecca tightened her grip on her mug. "Is there something I can help you with, Mabel?" she asked pointedly. Mabel had the decency to look embarrassed, but continued nonetheless. "Just looking out for you, dear. Nobody knows why she really left academia. Some say it was a dangerous experiment gone wrong. Or maybe," Rebecca countered, rising from her seat, "people deserve privacy and respect rather than becoming subjects of baseless gossip." As she exited the diner, Rebecca nearly collided with Michael Reed, the local veterinarian, a tall man with kind eyes and prematurely salt and pepper hair. "Whoa, careful there," he said, steadying her. "Everything okay?" "Just town politics," Rebecca sighed. "Apparently being friends with Eleanor Winters makes me fascinating by association." Michael's expression softened. "Eleanor's been a patient, if distant, neighbor for years. Best roses I've ever seen, though Duke's the only one who gets regular social visits." He paused. "Speaking of which, Duke's due for his annual checkup. Eleanor's been avoiding my calls." "We're headed there now," Rebecca offered. "Sonny has a standing playdate with Duke on Thursdays. You could join us." At the farm, they found Eleanor in her greenhouse, dictating notes into a recorder while examining microscope slides. She looked up, startled at the trio's arrival. "Rebecca, I wasn't expecting." Her gaze landed on Michael. "Dr. Reed, this is unexpected." "Eleanor," he acknowledged with a warm smile. "Duke's overdue for his checkup, and you've been dodging my calls." "I've been busy," Eleanor replied stiffly. Sophia broke the tension by rushing forward. "Miss Eleanor, I drew you a picture of your special roses." She proudly presented a crayon drawing where giant red flowers dominated the page. Eleanor's expression softened immediately. "It's beautiful, Sonny. I'll put it right here on my workbench." "How's Virginia?" she asked Rebecca, concern evident in her voice. Rebecca shook her head slightly. "The new treatment isn't working as well as hoped. The medical bills." She trailed off, watching Sophia, who had skipped away to find Duke. Michael cleared his throat. I should examine Duke while I'm here. As he moved toward the house, Eleanor called after him. The pharmaceutical company came back yesterday. They're offering a partnership. Michael turned, surprise evident. North Star? They've been buying up agricultural land all over the county. They're not interested in my land, Eleanor said. They want my roses, specifically the compounds in my experimental hybrid. Rebecca's eyes widened. The crimson ones? The ones with medicinal properties? Eleanor nodded. The same ones that might help conditions like your mother's. Eleanor, that's incredible. Rebecca exclaimed. It's complicated, Eleanor replied, her expression troubled. Commercial development would mean revealing my research, making it public again. The offer is substantial. Michael studied her face carefully. But you're hesitating because? Because nothing comes without strings, Eleanor said sharply. I left that world for good reasons. Later, after Michael had examined Duke and Sophia had exhausted herself playing in the season's first snow, Rebecca lingered in Eleanor's kitchen. The town's talking, she said quietly. About who you were before. Eleanor's hands stilled as she washed teacups. And what are they saying? That you were brilliant. That there was a controversy. That you disappeared suddenly. People always want simple stories for complex situations, Eleanor said, her voice brittle. The truth is rarely satisfying. Mom's getting worse, Rebecca said suddenly, changing topics. The treatments are draining our savings, and the insurance is fighting us every step. Eleanor turned, her eyes reflecting a battle between self-preservation and compassion. Bring her here next week. I want to try something. What? A tea made from those roses. It's experimental, but the biochemical properties suggest anti-inflammatory and immune-modulating effects. Is it safe? Rebecca asked. Safer than what I ran from, Eleanor replied cryptically, the ghosts of her past hovering between them as snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in clean, blank silence. Mid-December brought a fierce nor'easter to Vermont, howling winds driving snow horizontally across the landscape. Ancient pines groaned under the weight of ice, and power lines sagged precariously throughout the county. Eleanor stood at her living room window, watching the storm rage as the lights flickered ominously. The forecast had predicted 2 feet of snow, but the intensity of the blizzard exceeded all expectations. It's getting worse, Duke, she murmured to her loyal companion. Good thing we stocked up on firewood. Duke whined softly beside her, his ears perked forward as he listened to something beyond the whistling wind. Suddenly, he barked sharply and bolted toward the kitchen door. Duke, no, Eleanor called, but the determined shepherd had already nudged the door open with his muzzle and disappeared into the swirling white chaos. Eleanor grabbed her heavy coat and flashlight, cursing under her breath. The temperature had plummeted to well below freezing, and the visibility was near zero. Stepping outside was like entering a disorienting white void, the familiar contours of her property erased by the storm. Duke, she shouted, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. The beam of her flashlight penetrated only a few feet into the whiteout. Following what she hoped were Duke's paw prints, Eleanor trudged toward the back property line, the snow already reaching mid-calf. After 30 minutes of fruitless searching, Eleanor was forced to retreat to the house, her extremities numb and her heart racing with worry. Duke had never run off like this before. As she stamped snow from her boots, the phone rang, the landline she maintained for emergencies. Eleanor. Rebecca's voice crackled through the poor connection. Is everything okay over there? The power's gone out across half the county. Duke's run off, Eleanor replied, her voice tight with anxiety. He took off into the storm about an hour ago. I couldn't find him. Oh no, Rebecca gasped. Was he chasing something? I don't know. He just bolted. Eleanor pressed her fingers against her temples. He's never done this before. As soon as the roads are passable, we'll help search, Rebecca promised. Mom's been doing better since starting your rose tea, by the way. Her last blood work showed improvement. The connection faded into static before Eleanor could respond. Placing the receiver down, she moved methodically through the house, gathering emergency supplies as the power flickered once more and finally died, plunging Maple Hollow Farm into darkness. Morning brought clear skies and an eerie silence. The landscape transformed into a glistening white expanse. Eleanor was already dressed, and preparing to resume her search when a truck pulled into her driveway. Michael Reed stepped out, followed by Rebecca and, to Eleanor's surprise, several other neighbors she recognized only vaguely from town. "Search party reporting for duty," Michael announced, his breath clouding in the frigid air. "Duke's helped half the people in this valley over the years, tracking lost livestock and guiding hikers. Time to return the favor." Eleanor blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you," she managed, before her scientific mind took over. "We should establish a grid search pattern. Duke is trained to respond to a specific whistle." For 3 days, the search continued. Eleanor displayed tracking skills that surprised even seasoned hunters, reading subtle signs in the disturbed snow and broken branches that others missed. The search revealed aspects of her that contradicted the town's image of an isolated recluse. Her methodical approach, her endurance through the bitter cold, and her extensive knowledge of the terrain beyond her property lines. On the third evening, as the search party gathered at Eleanor's kitchen table discussing the next day's plans, Sophia burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement. "I know where Duke is," she exclaimed breathlessly. "I saw him in my dream. He's guarding a secret door in the big rocks behind your barn." The adults exchanged glances, but Eleanor knelt to Sophia's level. "The outcropping on the North Ridge?" she asked seriously. Sophia nodded emphatically. "He's protecting something important. He needs you to come. There's an old survey marker up there," Michael offered. "But I've never noticed any cave system. It's worth checking," Eleanor decided, already reaching for her coat. The ridge would provide shelter from the storm. An hour later, guided by Sophia's unwavering certainty, they climbed the snow-covered ridge behind Eleanor's property. As they approached the granite outcropping, a familiar bark echoed from somewhere within the rocks. "Duke," Eleanor called, relief flooding her voice. The German shepherd emerged from what appeared to be a solid rock face, barking insistently before disappearing again. Upon closer inspection, Eleanor discovered a narrow opening partially obscured by snow and overgrown vegetation, the entrance to a cave none of them had known existed. Duke stood guard inside, his posture protective over something deeper in the darkness. When Eleanor approached with her flashlight, the beam revealed what the faithful dog had discovered: ancient rock paintings covering the cave walls, depicting human figures, wildlife, and celestial patterns in red ochre and charcoal, untouched for perhaps thousands of years. "My God," Michael whispered, his voice echoing in the cavern. "This is extraordinary." Eleanor placed her hand on Duke's head, understanding dawning. "This is what you were protecting, wasn't it, boy?" she murmured. "You knew it was here all along." As the group stood in awe before the prehistoric artwork, Eleanor felt the carefully constructed boundaries of her private life crumbling beneath the weight of an unexpected discovery that would soon transform her quiet existence into something she had never anticipated. Mid-December brought a fierce nor'easter to Vermont, howling winds driving snow horizontally across the landscape. Ancient pines groaned under the weight of ice, and power lines sagged precariously throughout the county. Eleanor stood at her living room window, watching the storm rage as the lights flickered ominously. The forecast had predicted 2 feet of snow, but the intensity of the blizzard exceeded all expectations. "It's getting worse, Duke," she murmured to her loyal companion. "Good thing we stocked up on firewood." Duke whined softly beside her, his ears perked forward as he listened to something beyond the whistling wind. Suddenly, he barked sharply and bolted toward the kitchen door. "Duke, no," Eleanor called, but the determined shepherd had already nudged the door open with his muzzle and disappeared into the swirling white chaos. Eleanor grabbed her heavy coat and flashlight, cursing under her breath. The temperature had plummeted to well below freezing, and the visibility was near zero. Stepping outside was like entering a disorienting white void, the familiar contours of her property erased by the storm. "Duke," she shouted, her voice immediately swallowed by the howling wind. The beam of her flashlight penetrated only a few feet into the whiteout. Following what she hoped were Duke's paw prints, Eleanor trudged toward the back property line, the snow already reaching mid-calf. After 30 minutes of fruitless searching, Eleanor was forced to retreat to the house, her extremities numb and her heart racing with worry. Duke had never run off like this before. As she stamped snow from her boots, the phone rang, the landline she maintained for emergencies. "Eleanor," Rebecca's voice crackled through the poor connection. Is everything okay over there? The power's gone out across half the county. Duke's run off, Eleanor replied, her voice tight with anxiety. He took off into the storm about an hour ago. I couldn't find him. Oh no, Rebecca gasped. Was he chasing something? I don't know. He just bolted. Eleanor pressed her fingers against her temples. He's never done this before. As soon as the roads are passable, we'll help search, Rebecca promised. Mom's been doing better since starting your rose tea, by the way. Her last blood work showed improvement. The connection faded into static before Eleanor could respond. Placing the receiver down, she moved methodically through the house, gathering emergency supplies as the power flickered once more and finally died, plunging Maple Hollow Farm into darkness. Morning brought clear skies and an eerie silence. The landscape transformed into a glistening white expanse. Eleanor was already dressed and preparing to resume her search when a truck pulled into her driveway. Michael Reed stepped out, followed by Rebecca and, to Eleanor's surprise, several other neighbors she recognized only vaguely from town. Search party reporting for duty, Michael announced, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Dukes helped half the people in this valley over the years, tracking lost livestock and guiding hikers. Time to return the favor. Eleanor blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you, she managed, before her scientific mind took over. We should establish a grid search pattern. Duke is trained to respond to a specific whistle. For 3 days, the search continued. Eleanor displayed tracking skills that surprised even seasoned hunters, reading subtle signs in the disturbed snow and broken branches that others missed. The search revealed aspects of her that contradicted the town's image of an isolated recluse. Her methodical approach, her endurance through the bitter cold, and her extensive knowledge of the terrain beyond her property lines. On the third evening, as the search party gathered at Eleanor's kitchen table discussing the next day's plans, Sophia burst through the door, her face flushed with excitement. I know where Duke is, she exclaimed breathlessly. I saw him in my dream. He's guarding a secret door in the big rocks behind your barn. The adults exchanged glances, but Eleanor knelt to Sophia's level. The outcropping on the North Ridge? She asked seriously. Sophia nodded emphatically. He's protecting something important. He needs you to come. There's an old survey marker up there, Michael offered. But I've never noticed any cave system. It's worth checking, Eleanor decided, already reaching for her coat. The ridge would provide shelter from the storm. An hour later, guided by Sophia's unwavering certainty, they climbed the snow-covered ridge behind Eleanor's property. As they approached the granite outcropping, a familiar bark echoed from somewhere within the rocks. Duke, Eleanor called, relief flooding her voice. The German shepherd emerged from what appeared to be a solid rock face, barking insistently before disappearing again. Upon closer inspection, Eleanor discovered a narrow opening partially obscured by snow and overgrown vegetation, the entrance to a cave none of them had known existed. Duke stood guard inside, his posture protective over something deeper in the darkness. When Eleanor approached with her flashlight, the beam revealed what the faithful dog had discovered. Ancient rock paintings covering the cave walls, depicting human figures, wildlife, and celestial patterns in red ochre and charcoal, untouched for perhaps thousands of years. My God, Michael whispered, his voice echoing in the cavern. This is extraordinary. Eleanor placed her hand on Duke's head, understanding dawning. This is what you were protecting, wasn't it, boy? She murmured. You knew it was here all along. As the group stood in awe before the prehistoric artwork, Eleanor felt the carefully constructed boundaries of her private life crumbling beneath the weight of an unexpected discovery that would soon transform her quiet existence into something she had never anticipated. News of the cave discovery spread through the small Vermont town like wildfire. By early January, Eleanor's once tranquil property had become a hub of scientific activity. State archaeologists erected tents near the cave entrance, and university researchers arrived daily to document and study the ancient paintings. Dr. Amelia Santos, the lead archaeologist from the University of Vermont, consulted with Eleanor in the farmhouse kitchen, spreading maps across the worn oak table. These paintings are exceptional, Eleanor, she explained, excitement evident in her voice. Preliminary dating suggests they're at least 4,000 years old, possibly the oldest documented indigenous rock art in the northeastern United States. Eleanor traced the outline of the property on the map. And what happens now? To the land, to the cave? The site qualifies for historic preservation status, Dr. Santos replied. The state is prepared to offer an easement agreement that would protect the cave while allowing scientific access. You'd maintain ownership, but privacy becomes impossible. Eleanor finished, staring out the window where a documentary crew filmed the ridge line. Dr. Santos nodded sympathetically. I understand this isn't what you envisioned for your property. On the bright side, there could be significant tax benefits and potential grants for land conservation. Later that afternoon, Rebecca and Sophia arrived for their regular visit, navigating past the media vans parked along the driveway. Miss Eleanor, Sophia exclaimed, rushing in with a newspaper. You and Duke are famous. Look, the local paper's headline read, Prehistoric Cave Art Discovered by Heroic Dog. A photo showed Duke sitting proudly beside Eleanor at the cave entrance. Infamous is more like it, Eleanor muttered, setting the paper aside. Rebecca, I need to talk to you. Privately. As Sophia settled in the living room with Duke, the two women retreated to the greenhouse. I'm considering selling the property, Eleanor said abruptly. This attention, these people everywhere, it's not what I came here for. Rebecca's eyes widened. Leave? But where would you go? Somewhere quiet. Anonymous. Eleanor adjusted a grow light above her experimental roses. Perhaps further north, into Canada. What about your research? The roses? Mom's treatment has been working, Eleanor. Her doctors are amazed at the improvement. Eleanor's shoulders tensed. That's part of what I wanted to discuss. Northstar Pharmaceuticals has increased their offer substantially since the cave discovery. They're proposing to buy the property, preserve the archaeological site, and develop the rose-derived compounds commercially. That's wonderful news, isn't it? Is it? Eleanor turned, her expression troubled. I've been doing some investigation into Northstar. Their business model involves patenting natural compounds, then charging exorbitant prices for the resulting medications. She pulled out a folder containing financial reports and news clippings. Last year, they acquired rights to a lymphoma treatment derived from Pacific yew trees. They immediately raised the price 800%, putting it out of reach for most patients without premium insurance. Rebecca's face fell. Like my mother's situation. Exactly. Eleanor nodded grimly. If I sell to them, the treatment helping Virginia becomes a proprietary drug costing thousands per month. There has to be another way, Rebecca insisted. Eleanor hesitated, then reached for a sealed envelope on her workbench. There might be. I received this yesterday. The letter bore a Brazilian postmark and was addressed in a familiar scrawl that made Eleanor's heart contract. Rebecca watched as Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly while opening it. It's from Martin, Eleanor explained softly. My husband. Your ex-husband? Rebecca asked carefully. We never formally divorced. Eleanor's voice was distant as she scanned the letter. He's coming back. After 3 years in the Amazon. He's returning next month. Is that good news? Eleanor laughed without humor. I don't know. We didn't part on the best terms. He chose his research over. She stopped herself. Over other priorities. You wanted children, Rebecca guessed gently. Eleanor's eyes snapped up, surprised at Rebecca's perception. Yes, he didn't. His work was too important, too all-consuming. The irony is that I ended up just as consumed by my own work, just as isolated. Before Rebecca could respond, shouting erupted from outside. They rushed back to the house to find James Harrington from Northstar Pharmaceuticals in a heated argument with Michael Reed on Eleanor's front porch. This is private property, Michael was saying firmly. Dr. Winters has made it clear she's not interested in unscheduled meetings. The offer on the table won't remain forever, Harrington replied coldly. With the archaeological discovery, there are now multiple interested parties. Eleanor stepped forward, Duke materializing at her side with a low growl. Mr. Harrington, I would appreciate you sending all communications through proper channels. Now, please leave before I have the sheriff escort you off my property. As Harrington retreated to his car, Michael turned to Eleanor with concern. Are you okay? He's been asking questions all over town about your research. I'm fine, Eleanor replied, though her expression betrayed her anxiety. But decisions are coming due that I can't postpone much longer. That night, after everyone had gone, Eleanor sat at her desk reviewing Northstar's contract offer, Martin's letter, and the state's preservation proposal. Duke rested his head on her lap, sensing her turmoil. "What would you do, old friend?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Stay and fight, or run away again?" Duke's brown eyes seemed to hold an answer as he gazed steadily back at her, his loyalty unwavering despite the chaos swirling around their once peaceful sanctuary. January brought a crystalline cold that transformed the Vermont landscape into a scene from a fairy tale. Icicles hung like glass daggers from the eaves of Eleanor's farmhouse, and the frozen pond behind the barn reflected the pale winter sun like a mirror. Inside the greenhouse, however, lush greenery thrived in defiance of the season, Eleanor's experimental roses blooming in vibrant crimson against the stark white world outside. Eleanor sat at her desk, Martin's letter spread before her for what must have been the 100th reading. Certain phrases seemed to leap from the page. Returning next month, serious health developments, ironic twist of fate, and most puzzlingly, seeking your expertise with a condition similar to what you've been researching. The telephone rang, interrupting her contemplation. Virginia Harper's voice came through the line, stronger than Eleanor had heard in months. "Eleanor, dear, I wanted to invite you to dinner tomorrow. A small thank you for the miracle you've worked with that tea. My doctors are completely baffled." "I'd be delighted," Eleanor replied, genuinely pleased at the improvement in Virginia's condition. "Though I should warn you, the miracle is still experimental. Nevertheless, it's given me something I hadn't dared hope for, time." Virginia paused. "Rebecca mentioned you might be considering leaving. Is that true?" Eleanor sighed, gazing out the window at the archaeology team working near the cave. "It's one option I'm weighing. Well, perhaps dinner might provide some perspective. 6 o'clock tomorrow?" After hanging up, Eleanor turned to find Duke staring fixedly at the driveway. Moments later, the crunch of tires on snow announced a visitor. Through the frosted window, she recognized Michael Reed's truck. "I come bearing news," Michael announced as he stamped snow from his boots in the entryway. His face was flushed from the cold, his expression uncharacteristically serious. The State Historical Society has accelerated their preservation offer based on preliminary findings in the cave. They're calling the site one of exceptional cultural significance. Eleanor gestured him toward the kitchen. "Coffee, please." He settled at the table, accepting the steaming mug she offered. "There's something else. Harrington's been digging into your background, your research at Cornell, the reason you left so suddenly." Eleanor's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "What does he know?" "Enough to be dangerous," Michael replied grimly. "He's been talking to pharmaceutical journals about a breakthrough you allegedly suppressed 15 years ago. Something about plant-derived compounds with regenerative properties." "Allegedly" is the operative word, Eleanor said stiffly, her posture rigid with sudden tension. That research was incomplete, the preliminary results overblown by media speculation. "Eleanor," Michael said gently, "I've known you for 3 years as a neighbor. In that time, you've never once invited me in for coffee until Duke found Sophia. Now you're brewing therapeutic teas from experimental roses, and Virginia Harper's immune markers are improving dramatically. Whatever you discovered back then, you're still working on it here, aren't you?" Eleanor remained silent, weighing how much to reveal. "You can trust me," Michael insisted. "But if Harrington connects those dots publicly, your privacy is over." Eleanor took a deep breath. The research at Cornell involved plant-derived compounds that showed potential for cellular regeneration, specifically immune system repair. It worked in preliminary trials, but the university wanted to patent and commercialize immediately. Her voice hardened. "I believed it needed more testing, that rushing to market was dangerous and unethical. So you left, disappeared with your research." She nodded, "and came here to continue independently, away from profit motives and corporate timelines." "And now Martin's coming back," Michael observed, nodding toward the letter on her desk. "After abandoning you for the Amazon." "He didn't abandon me," Eleanor corrected sharply. "We made different choices. His research on endangered medicinal plants was important. Important enough to choose over starting a family with you?" Michael challenged, then immediately regretted his boldness. "I'm sorry, that was out of line." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "It's a fair assessment." She hesitated, then added, "What's strange is that Martin mentions having developed a condition similar to Virginia's. after working with plants that might treat it. Life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes, Michael observed. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, they saw a white van with a satellite dish pulling up beside the archaeology team's tents. Boston Globe, Michael identified, squinting at the logo. Looks like your cave is making national news. Eleanor watched the reporters setting up cameras with growing dismay. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Michael placed a hand over hers on the table, a gesture so unexpected that Eleanor nearly pulled away. You could run again, he said softly. Find another quiet corner somewhere. Or, he hesitated, you could stay and use this unexpected spotlight to do things on your terms. What do you mean? The state preservation offer includes public education grants. With the media attention on the cave, you have leverage. You could create something that preserves both the archaeological site and your research independence. Eleanor considered his words, a new possibility forming in her mind. A foundation, she murmured, for both archaeological preservation and botanical research, with guidelines ensuring affordability and accessibility of any resulting treatments. Michael added, catching on immediately. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. I'd need legal counsel and partners I could trust. Michael smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I might know a few people, starting with a certain veterinarian who's kept your secrets for 3 years. As they began sketching ideas at the kitchen table, Duke suddenly raised his head and trotted to the window, his tail wagging in recognition. Outside, Rebecca's car was pulling into the driveway, with Sophia bouncing excitedly in the back seat. But it was the tall, bearded man in the passenger seat who made Eleanor's heart skip a beat. That's impossible, she whispered, rising to her feet. He said next month. But there was no mistaking Martin Winters, even with the new lines etched into his face and the gray threading through his once dark beard. He had come home a month early, bringing with him complications Eleanor hadn't prepared for and possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine. The frozen gravel crunched beneath Eleanor's boots as she stepped onto the porch. Time seemed to slow as Martin emerged from Rebecca's car, his tall frame thinner than she remembered. His familiar blue eyes, still piercing despite the evident fatigue in his face, locked with hers across the yard. Duke bounded forward, clearly recognizing Martin despite the 3-year absence, circling and sniffing excitedly. Eleanor, Martin said, his voice hoarse with emotion. You look. He trailed off, seemingly unable to find adequate words. You're early, she replied, the coldness in her tone surprising even herself. And you've met Rebecca, apparently. Rebecca stepped forward, quick to explain. We met at the airport. I recognized him from the photo in your study. I hope you don't mind that I offered a ride. Michael appeared at Eleanor's side, a silent but supportive presence that didn't go unnoticed by Martin, whose eyes flickered between them with a question he didn't voice. Dr. Reed, Eleanor said stiffly. This is Dr. Martin Winters, my husband. Ex-husband, Martin corrected gently, though he never made it official. Sophia, oblivious to the tension, ran up to Martin with the fearlessness of childhood. Are you Miss Eleanor's prince? Like in the fairy tales. A startled laugh escaped Martin. Not quite, little one. More like the explorer who got lost and took too long to find his way back. Eleanor's composure threatened to crack at his words. Perhaps we should continue this inside, she suggested, leading the awkward group into the farmhouse. In the kitchen, an uncomfortable silence descended as Eleanor mechanically prepared tea. Martin's gaze traveled over the familiar surroundings, noting the changes and the constants with evident emotion. You've kept the place exactly as I remembered, he said softly. Some things don't change, Eleanor replied. Others do. She set the teapot down with more force than necessary. Your letter mentioned health concerns? Martin nodded, accepting the abrupt transition to business. An autoimmune disorder, ironically similar to what I understand Virginia Harper is battling. He glanced at Rebecca apologetically. The doctors in Brazil were baffled. It began with fatigue, then progressed to joint inflammation, muscle weakness. And you remembered my research, Eleanor finished for him. I never forgot it, Ellie, he said, using the nickname that once belonged to intimate moments. I've followed your work from afar, even after I left. The botanical journals may have stopped publishing under your name, but I recognized your methodology in those anonymous papers on rose-derived compounds. Eleanor's eyes widened. You knew I was continuing the research? I suspected. Hoped, really. Martin sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. When my symptoms began matching the very conditions your compounds showed promise for treating, it felt like karma, Michael suggested, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the house. Martin assessed the veterinarian with newfound interest. Perhaps. The indigenous healers I worked with in Brazil would certainly think so. He turned back to Eleanor. What I didn't know was that you'd found success, that your roses were actually healing people. Rebecca touched Eleanor's arm gently. Mom's latest tests show a 60% reduction in inflammatory markers. Her oncologist is calling it unprecedented. Martin leaned forward, his scientific curiosity evident despite his exhaustion. You've stabilized the alkaloid extraction, solved the degradation problem, and eliminated the hepatotoxicity, Eleanor confirmed, professional excitement momentarily overriding personal tension. The key was a specific soil composition that enhanced certain flavonoid production in the roses. Their exchange was interrupted by the intrusive sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the window, they could see James Harrington from North Star Pharmaceuticals approaching, accompanied by 2 other suits. Perfect timing, Eleanor muttered sarcastically. Martin's expression hardened as he peered outside. North Star? Eleanor, you're not seriously considering? They've made an offer, she interrupted. A very generous one. They'll bury your research, Martin said urgently. Patent it, price it beyond reach. Everything you fought against at Cornell. I'm well aware of their business model, Eleanor snapped. I don't need you swooping in after 3 years to tell me how to handle my work. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Michael cleared his throat awkwardly. I should probably go. Let you two stay, Eleanor said firmly. Please, you're part of this conversation now. The doorbell rang, and Duke growled low in his throat. Eleanor squared her shoulders. Rebecca, would you take Sophia to the greenhouse for a few minutes? I need to deal with Mr. Harrington. When Eleanor opened the door, Harrington's practiced smile didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Winters, forgive the interruption. We've prepared the final paperwork for your consideration. This isn't a good time, Eleanor replied coldly. I'm afraid time is becoming a factor, Harrington countered smoothly. Our board meets next week to finalize acquisitions. Without your signature, we'll need to pursue alternative research avenues. Martin appeared behind Eleanor, his presence commanding despite his weakened state. James Harrington, he said with recognition. Still chasing other scientists' discoveries, I see. Harrington's composure faltered momentarily. Dr. Martin Winters, this is unexpected. Last I heard, you were unreachable in the Amazon. Yet here I am. Martin smiled without warmth. Just in time to witness another attempted appropriation of my wife's groundbreaking work. Eleanor shot Martin an exasperated look before addressing Harrington again. As I said, this isn't a good time. I'll review your offer and respond through my attorney. Your attorney? Harrington repeated, confusion evident. Our understanding was that you were acting independently. Circumstances change, Eleanor replied, beginning to close the door. Good day, Mr. Harrington. After the pharmaceutical representatives reluctantly departed, Eleanor turned to Martin, arms crossed defensively. I don't need you fighting my battles, Martin. I've managed perfectly well on my own for 3 years. I know, he conceded, pain flickering across his features. You've always been the stronger one. He swayed suddenly, gripping the wall for support. Michael stepped forward immediately, medical instincts taking over. Let's get you sitting down, he said, guiding Martin to a chair. When was your last treatment? 2 weeks ago in Boston, Martin admitted, color draining from his face. The travel took more out of me than I expected. Eleanor's anger melted into concern as she recognized the familiar patterns of the disease, the same symptoms she'd observed in Virginia Harper. Without a word, she moved to the greenhouse, returning moments later with a thermos. Drink this, she instructed, pouring steaming rose tea into a mug. It's not a cure, but it should help with the inflammation. As Martin sipped the tea, his eyes never left Eleanor's face. I didn't come back just for this, he said quietly. I mean, yes, I need your help medically, but mostly, I came back because I finally understood what matters. What I gave up, The air between them became charged with unspoken history and lingering questions. Michael, sensing the need for privacy, excused himself to check on Rebecca and Sophia in the greenhouse. In the silence that followed, Eleanor studied the man she had once built her life around. The brilliant botanist whose passion had once matched her own, now humbled by illness and regret. "Why now, Martin?" she finally asked, the question that had haunted her since his letter arrived. "Why after 3 years?" "Because I was wrong," he answered simply. "About so many things. About what makes a life worth living. About what I truly needed." He set down the mug with trembling hands. "I've had a lot of time to think in the rainforest, and even more in hospital rooms. I kept asking myself, what would Eleanor do with this discovery? How would she approach this problem?" A tear slipped down Eleanor's cheek before she could stop it. And every answer led me back here," Martin said, his voice breaking. "To you. To the life I walked away from. To the family we could have had." Outside, snow began to fall again, coating the world in fresh white as Eleanor faced the ghost of her past and the uncertain path ahead. A path now complicated by Martin's return, Michael's friendship, and the growing community she'd reluctantly allowed into her life. The late January snow coated Maple Hollow Farm in a pristine blanket of white as Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the landscape in shades of pink and gold. Behind her, the farmhouse hummed with an unfamiliar energy. Martin at the dining table reviewing research notes, Michael discussing preservation options with the state archaeologist in the living room, and Rebecca helping Virginia settle in for her morning tea therapy in the sunroom. In just 2 months, her carefully constructed solitude had transformed into something resembling a research collective. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. "You're thinking too loudly," Martin observed from the table, his voice stronger after 2 weeks of consistent rose tea treatment. "I can practically hear the wheels turning." Eleanor turned to face him, arms crossed. "I'm weighing options." "You've always been methodical," Martin replied with a faint smile. "Let me guess, pro-con list? Decision matrix?" Despite herself, Eleanor felt a corner of her mouth twitch upward. "Something like that." Martin pushed aside his notes and leaned back in his chair. The color had returned to his face, though his frame remained thinner than in his prime. "You know what the townspeople are saying? That you're going to take Northstar's offer and disappear again. Harrington's been spreading rumors at the diner." "Let him talk," Eleanor said dismissively. "My decision isn't about him." The doorbell rang, and Duke padded to the entrance, his posture alert but not defensive. A familiar visitor, then. Eleanor opened the door to find Mayor Jenkins standing on her porch, his ruddy face bright with excitement beneath his wool hat. "Eleanor, just the scientist I hoped to see," he boomed, stomping snow from his boots. "Got a minute to discuss the Harvest Festival?" "The Harvest Festival?" Eleanor repeated blankly. "That's not until October. Planning starts early." Jenkins grinned, stepping inside when Eleanor reluctantly widened the door. "Especially when we're expecting record attendance this year thanks to your cave and those miracle roses." He spotted Martin at the table, and his eyebrows shot up. "Dr. Martin Winters. Well, I'll be. The prodigal husband returns." Martin winced at the characterization, but offered his hand. "Mayor Jenkins. Town hasn't changed much, I see." "More than you'd think," Jenkins replied cryptically before turning back to Eleanor. "Here's my proposition. The town council wants to feature Maple Hollow Farm as the centerpiece of this year's festival. We'd host the main celebration here, with guided tours of the cave, educational workshops about your botanical research, the works." Eleanor stared at him, dumbfounded. "You want to bring hundreds of people onto my property for a festival?" "Thousands, more likely," Jenkins corrected cheerfully. The Boston Globe article about the cave went national. "We've already had inquiries from tourism companies." Michael emerged from the living room, catching the tail end of the conversation. "It's an interesting proposal, actually," he said thoughtfully. "A public event could be the perfect platform to announce the foundation we've been discussing." "Foundation?" Jenkins perked up. "What foundation?" Eleanor hesitated, then decided transparency was inevitable. "We're considering establishing a non-profit organization dedicated to botanical research and archaeological preservation. An alternative to selling to Northstar." Jenkins' face lit up. "Brilliant. That's exactly the kind of local initiative the town council wants to support." He pulled a folder from his coat. We've already drafted a tourism development grant proposal. With your permission, we could redirect it toward this foundation. Eleanor exchanged a look with Martin, who nodded encouragingly. I need to review the details, she said cautiously. Of course, Jenkins agreed readily. Just think about it. This could be a new beginning for everyone. After the mayor departed, Eleanor retreated to her greenhouse, seeking refuge among her beloved roses. She found Sophia there, carefully watering plants under Virginia's supervision. Miss Eleanor, Sophia exclaimed. Grandma's teaching me about the roses. I want to be a plant scientist like you when I grow up. Virginia smiled apologetically. Hope you don't mind us tending to them. Sophia insisted on helping. I don't mind at all, Eleanor replied, surprised to realize she meant it. You have a good touch, Sonny. Sophia beamed at the compliment, then asked with childish directness, Are you and Dr. Martin going to stay married now that he's back? Dr. Michael looks sad when you talk to Dr. Martin. Sophia, Virginia admonished gently. Eleanor knelt to Sophia's level, choosing her words carefully. Grown-up relationships are complicated, Sonny. Sometimes people need time apart to understand what they truly want. Like when I lost my butterfly and found you instead? Sophia asked innocently. Eleanor smiled despite the lump in her throat. Something like that. Later that evening, after the house had quieted and most visitors had departed, Eleanor found herself on the porch with Martin, watching stars emerge above the snow-covered landscape. The familiar constellations of winter hung crisp and bright in the Vermont sky. You've built something remarkable here, Ellie, Martin said quietly. Not just the research, but these connections with people. The Eleanor I knew 3 years ago would never have allowed a child to water her experimental roses. Eleanor sighed, her breath forming a cloud in the cold air. I didn't intend any of it. Duke found Sophia, and everything just snowballed from there. Some discoveries happened by accident, Martin observed. That's what made us both good scientists, being open to unexpected results. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Martin continued. I've been thinking about what you said when I first arrived, about not needing me to fight your battles. You were right. You've created something extraordinary without me. Eleanor turned to study his profile, the familiar lines of his face illuminated by moonlight. What are you saying, Martin? I'm saying that I didn't come back to reclaim my place in your life, he clarified, meeting her gaze directly. I came back to offer whatever support you need, as a colleague, a friend, or whatever role you might allow me. The foundation you're planning with Michael and the others. It's exactly the kind of ethical approach we used to talk about. Before ambition got in the way, Eleanor added softly. Martin nodded, regret evident in his expression. Before I chose career advancement over our future together. He hesitated, then added, I've noticed how Michael looks at you, and how sometimes, when you think no one's watching, you look at him. Eleanor tensed, unprepared for this direction. Martin, it's okay, Ellie, he interrupted gently. 3 years is a long time. We both changed. I just want you to know that I won't stand in the way of whatever happiness you've found. Before Eleanor could respond, Duke suddenly raised his head and barked once, his alert for approaching visitors. Headlights appeared on the long driveway, and Eleanor recognized James Harrington's sleek car approaching despite the late hour. Persistent, isn't he? Martin remarked with a frown. Eleanor stood, squaring her shoulders. I think it's time we gave Mr. Harrington a definitive answer, don't you? As Harrington approached the porch, briefcase in hand and determination in his stride, Eleanor felt a strange calm settle over her. The decision that had weighed on her for weeks suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. Dr. Winters, Harrington called out. I apologize for the late visit, but our board requires your answer by morning. I've brought the final contract with some additional incentives I think you'll find quite compelling. Eleanor descended the porch steps to meet him, Martin and Duke flanking her like sentinels. That won't be necessary, Mr. Harrington. I've made my decision. Harrington's smile froze at her tone. I see. And that decision would be, I'm declining your offer, Eleanor stated firmly. Furthermore, I'll be announcing the establishment of the Maple Hollow Foundation at the town's Harvest Festival. We'll be pursuing independent research with public accessibility guarantees for any resulting treatments. Harrington's expression darkened. You can't be serious. The resources required for clinical trials alone will be secured through grants, private donors, and strategic partnerships. Eleanor finished for him. The state has already expressed interest, as has the university. This is a mistake, Harrington warned, anger seeping into his voice. We could make you wealthy beyond imagination. Eleanor smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Mr. Harrington, if I had been interested in wealth, I would have stayed at Cornell and commercialized my research 15 years ago. Good night. As Harrington's car disappeared down the driveway, Martin squeezed Eleanor's shoulder supportively. That was long overdue. Eleanor turned toward the farmhouse, its windows glowing with warm light against the winter darkness. It's not going to be easy, she acknowledged. The foundation, the public interest, balancing research with preservation. The best discoveries rarely follow an easy path, Martin replied, keeping pace beside her. But you won't be walking it alone this time. Eleanor paused at the porch steps, looking back at the property that had been her refuge and was now poised to become something far greater. No, she agreed, thinking of Rebecca's family, of Michael's unwavering support, of the community that had somehow formed around her despite her best efforts at isolation. Not alone at all. Spring arrived at Maple Hollow Farm with a vibrant explosion of color. Cherry blossoms dotted the orchard in clouds of pale pink, while daffodils and crocuses carpeted the lawns with splashes of yellow and purple. In the expanded greenhouse, now triple its original size, Eleanor's experimental roses bloomed in dazzling profusion, their rich crimson petals catching the morning light. Standing at the entrance to this glass sanctuary, Eleanor surveyed the transformation with a sense of wonder. For technicians in white lab coats moved methodically between workstations, recording data and tending to the plants. Through the connecting door, she could see Martin in the newly constructed research lab, his health fully restored, supervising a group of graduate students from the University of Vermont. The Maple Hollow Foundation was now a reality, with construction of the visitor center near the archaeological site scheduled for completion in June. Morning, Dr. Winters called Jessica Chun, the brilliant young botanist Eleanor had hired as research director. The molecular analysis from the third-generation hybrid is ready for your review. Thank you, Jessica, Eleanor replied, accepting the tablet. As she scrolled through the data, a smile spread across her face. The stability markers are holding. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Should I update the clinical trial parameters? Jessica asked eagerly. Let's consult with Dr. Harper first, Eleanor decided. She has the most experience with patient responses. Virginia Harper had joined the Foundation's medical advisory board 3 months ago, her recovery now so complete that few would guess she had once been gravely ill. Her expertise as a former pharmaceutical consultant had proven invaluable in navigating the complex regulatory landscape of botanical medicine development. Eleanor's phone chimed with a message from Rebecca. Sophia's school bus just dropped her off. She's running to the greenhouse now. Fair warning. Moments later, 9-year-old Sophia burst through the door, her golden curls bouncing and her backpack still slung over one shoulder. Duke, now showing touches of gray around his muzzle but still spry, trotted faithfully beside her. Dr. Eleanor, look what I made. Sophia thrust a science project folder into Eleanor's hands. I got an A+ on my plant genetics presentation. Eleanor examined the carefully drawn diagrams and neatly printed observations with pride. Sophia had been spending every afternoon at the farm since her father's deployment ended, developing a genuine talent for botanical science under Eleanor's mentorship. This is exceptional work, Sonny, Eleanor praised, especially your hypothesis about adaptive flowering patterns. Have you shown this to Dr. Martin yet? Not yet, Sophia replied, already moving toward the lab. Is Dr. Michael here too? He promised to explain photosynthesis to my class next week. He's in the main office, finalizing the ecotourism permits, Eleanor answered, following the enthusiastic child. The relationship between Eleanor, Martin, and Michael had evolved into something unprecedented yet harmonious. Martin had become the Foundation's research director, channeling his expertise into developing sustainable cultivation methods. Michael had redirected his veterinary practice toward wildlife conservation, establishing a rehabilitation center on the eastern edge of the property. And Eleanor had finally found her place at the center of it all, no longer hiding from connection, but embracing it as the source of her greatest strength. As she approached the main farmhouse, now converted into the Foundation's headquarters. Eleanor paused to watch a group of archaeologists carefully documenting new findings at the cave site. The ancient paintings had attracted international attention, revealing a previously unknown indigenous settlement pattern in New England and transforming historical understanding of the region. Inside the house, she found Michael in what had once been her private living room, now a bustling office where he and Rebecca coordinated the Foundation's public outreach programs. "There you are," Michael greeted her warmly. "Mayor Jenkins called again about the anniversary celebration next week. Apparently, the governor is planning to attend." Eleanor groaned. "More speeches. The price of changing the world," Michael teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners, the same kind eyes that had finally convinced Eleanor, 6 months ago, to embrace the possibility of love again. The simple silver band on her left hand caught the light as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Speaking of the anniversary," Rebecca interjected, "Mama's been working with the event planner. She wants to know if you'd prefer the reception in the orchard or by the pond." "The pond," Eleanor decided without hesitation. "It's where everything began, in a way." Later that afternoon, as the spring sun began its descent toward the western hills, Eleanor found herself walking alone along the wooden fence where Duke had first discovered Sophia. The memory was so vivid: the crying child, the tangled dress, the moment that had irreversibly altered the trajectory of her carefully isolated existence. "Penny for your thoughts?" Martin's voice came from behind her. Eleanor turned to find her ex-husband leaning against a maple tree, his research notebook tucked under his arm. Though they had chosen different paths romantically, their scientific partnership had flourished into a deep friendship built on mutual respect. "Just reflecting," she replied. "1 year ago today, Duke found Sophia trapped in this fence. And now," she gestured toward the thriving Foundation campus spread out below them. Martin nodded thoughtfully. "From solitary researcher to the head of an internationally recognized foundation. Not bad for a woman who once claimed to prefer plants to people." Eleanor laughed softly. "Life has a way of correcting our misconceptions." "Indeed it does," Martin agreed, his expression turning serious. "I received some news today. The Brazilian government has approved our sustainable harvesting proposal for the Amazon medicinal plants. They want us to establish a sister foundation there." "That's wonderful, Martin. Will you go?" "For part of the year, yes," he confirmed. "With your blessing, of course. The cross-pollination between our research could be groundbreaking." "You have my full support," Eleanor assured him, genuine happiness in her voice for the path he had chosen, a path that honored both his scientific passion and the ethical principles they shared. As they walked back toward the main campus, Duke suddenly barked and raced ahead toward the meadow beyond the orchard. Eleanor and Martin followed curiously, finding Michael, Rebecca, Virginia, and Sophia already gathered there, faces upturned in wonder. The sight took Eleanor's breath away. Dozens, no, hundreds, of blue butterflies danced among the wildflowers, their iridescent wings catching the golden light of late afternoon. The same species Sophia had chased a year ago, now returned in spectacular abundance. "It's a good omen," Virginia declared with certainty. "For what, Grandma?" Sophia asked, carefully capturing a photograph with her science journal camera. "For new beginnings," Virginia replied, squeezing Eleanor's hand. "For paths that seem lost but lead to unexpected discoveries." As the sun dipped lower, painting the Vermont hills in shades of amber and gold, Eleanor found herself surrounded by the family she had created, not by blood, but by choice and circumstance. Duke leaned against her leg, his presence as steady and faithful as always. Michael's arm slipped around her waist, and she leaned into his embrace, watching Sophia patiently explaining butterfly migration patterns to an enthralled group of visiting school children. In the distance, the lights of the research campus began to glow against the approaching twilight, a beacon of scientific hope and ethical innovation. "No regrets," Michael murmured close to her ear. Eleanor shook her head, certainty filling her heart. "Not one. Every step of the journey brought me exactly where I needed to be." Around them, the blue butterflies continued their aerial dance, a living reminder that sometimes getting lost is the only way to find one's true destination. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and if you watched this far, comment, "I watched all the way through," and share your opinion about this story. Oh, and don't forget to watch the next video that appears on the end screen. It's very exciting.